Hello everybody, Liz here and welcome to my channel. And I have finally finished a published work. I have not been able to finish a single published work in all of 2019. I've started so many things but it just has not happened. I'm in like the biggest book slump of my life. And I say published works because I have been reading fan fiction.
But technically it doesn't like count towards your like Goodread goals or anything like that, and you can't like post a review anywhere like officially, so that's why I said published works, because I do feel and think and believe that fan fiction is a true piece of literature, you know.
Anyways, back to what I was saying. So like I said, I finished my very first book slash short story of the year, and that is The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I'm pretty
I
sure
don't know how to actually, my phonetics is really bad.
Yeah, so I don't know what else to say, but the school system failed me. Anyway, like I said, I finished The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas, a short story, a Wins 12 Quarters story by Ursula K. She is an American writer. She is well known for her science fiction, fantasy, and religious pieces. She's written quite a bit of things. This is the first time I've ever read anything by her, and I am gonna be frank, and the first time I heard of Omelas was when I watched BTS's Spring Day music video. There's a huge, there's a scene and there's like this huge thing that says Omelas, and it looks like a diner kind of lights kind of thing. I'll try to put a screenshot of that. And so that's the first time I've seen the word Omelas, and then I was watching like a theory video or something, and it talked about how it was actually referencing this story written by Ursula. This is a short story, so it's not very long. I believe it's 99 cents on Amazon. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it is 99 cents. That's how much I bought it for. And it is a short story, and I am a huge believer that short stories are extremely underrated. Like, the amount of work that it takes to make a short story well is very, very intense. And I say this as someone who's written short stories. Anyways, if you have not read The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas, I highly, 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 highly recommend it. It is an extremely powerful piece, and it raises a lot of questions, and I wanted to talk about it because I was left with so many thoughts and emotions, and just it really evoked a lot of things inside of me. And so if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It takes less than 30 minutes to read it, according to Amazon. And yeah, if you don't mind spoilers and you're okay with all of that stuff, feel free to stay. But if not, go and read it and come back. Or if you just want to hear about my thoughts on it, just stay. That's cool too. Anyways, I've been blabbering for a long time. But like I said, The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas. I finished reading it and I had just a lot of thoughts, and I loved how strict the ideology behind the short story is. So obviously Ursula, and she talks about how she took someone else's, two other writers who posed the same question. So the question being, would you be okay essentially with the suffering of one person would equate the happiness of the masses? And so the dilemma being, is it right, is it wrong, can we dictate that? And so she answers and asks that question at the same time, and she's never come out and said like what she believes, but she kind of leaves it up for interpretation. And well, that's what we're gonna talk about, my interpretation of it. And this is why I love literature, just the interpretation. So I love that she set these hard rules. Like, everybody knows, everybody knows what's going on, and whether they know why or not, they know that this is going on. So basically what is happening is obviously like the child is being kept in miserable conditions for the betterment, for the prosperity of Omelas. And so everybody knows about it. It's a child, which I feel like is a very interesting choice because of all that it implies. And the child had known some kind of kindness before. There's a lot of questions I have about how the child gets chosen. Like, who decides that this child is going to be the child that's gonna get shoved in this closet? How long does the child stay in this closet? Like, where did the tradition start? So a lot of these questions that obviously, like, perhaps I will never have the answer to, and they'll just be posed in my head. I thought it was a very interesting choice that she picked a child, because I think if it would have been an adult, more people would have been okay with it. Like, they've lived their life, you know, you kind of, as an adult, you've lived your childhood, you live this innocence, but the fact that it is a child, something that embodies pureness and innocence and freedom and joy and happiness, is what's being chosen, is extremely, I think, was very, very interesting, and it was very pivotal in how we view the story. So the very first, like, and again, she tells you, she's like, you cannot live in this world and not know what's going on. Sorry, I'm like looking at my other thing. And that's one of my favorite aspects of it, because, like, are you a bad person? Like, I guess it poses the questions, like, are you a bad person because you're okay with the reality that you're living in? And so this story is about the people, it's called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. So at the end, like, there's people that know, and then people that choose to leave essentially this paradise and just keep going. And that in itself, I believe, is such a huge metaphor for a lot of different things. Personally, my very first one that I thought of was the metaphor for suicide. Like, they walk away from essentially what is perceived as perfection, what is perceived as a paradise, with this one particular kind of, you know, clause in the contract, and they can't live with themselves. They can't live with this knowledge, regardless of how happy they are. So in essence, that kind of doesn't work right, doesn't it? Like, they're supposed to be happy, they're supposed to be content with what they're given, but they aren't, and they choose to leave. And it's people of all ages, young, old, you know, all types of people, and then they just leave, and nobody can stop them. And I thought personally that was a huge metaphor for suicide, and just for people that perhaps also suffer from mental illnesses. Like, you live in this world, perhaps you're not bad off, like, you live decently, but you still are not happy because you know, like, that the world is fucked up, or you feel fucked up, and all of these questions and these doubts cannot allow you to live in this place. And Omelas essentially is a home, and if that makes any sense, yeah. So the quote that really, like, stuck with me is, the people at the door never say anything, but the child who has not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice sometimes speaks. I will be good, it says. Please let me out. I will be good. They never answer. So that's when you're like, it's a child. And it even talks about how, like, the reason that they treat children so well is because they know that there is this child stuck living in miserable conditions. Like, the child is essentially an animal. I have, like, so many thoughts, I'm, like, jumbling myself up. But another thing that I found interesting is, like, the moral question that it poses. Like, would you be okay with one person suffering if you and everybody else in the world essentially is going to be happy, fruitful, successful, all of these great things? I honestly think most people would be okay with it, or more okay with it, if it wouldn't be a child. Like, for example, in essence, it's very parallel to this whole idea of, like, Christ being the savior. Like, so Jesus Christ suffered so that we don't have to suffer. So it's like that similar mentality. It's like, when I was reading it, that's what I was thinking of. I was like, oh, everybody's like, no, like, the morality of it, like, how can you ask that, how can you want that? But that's essentially what we're being led to believe if you're, you know, of the Christian or Catholic or any of that kind of religion.
I'm going to be talking about Christianity and Jesus and stuff like that in a fictional sense. Like, if it wasn't a religion, I guess it was more of a story.
So in this story that we know, that is the narrative, that Jesus Christ was born and died for our sins, or born and died to save humanity. So doesn't that the same thing, like, this child is born and dies and suffers for the happiness of other people? Why are we okay with it when it's Jesus, but not when it's a child. And so those are the kind of questions that it asks, and there is no right answer. And even Ursula says at the end of it, there is no right answers. And so just that, like the possibilities that you can ask the questions and the implications of it are absolutely just incredible. The fact that in such a short amount of time she can invoke these thoughts and these emotions in you, just so well done. Like the writing is so good. Like and then the short story too, it explains, you know, the philosophy of the people before her and why she chose what she chose, because she also talks about, like, it's a hard set. Like, you know that this child is there. You cannot take the child out without causing misery to everybody else. So it's not like a loophole where it's like, oh, well, if we are all miserable sometimes, like, it's okay if we take the child out. It's like, no, if you take this child out, everybody's going to miss. If you show this child kindness, everybody's going to be miserable. And that's also a question of, it's like, how do you choose a child? Like, is it a lottery? Like, is it like that one short story too with a lottery where everybody just puts their name in a raffle and, like, the unlucky child gets chosen? Or, like, is it like a birth thing? Like, how long has this been going on? Is this a deal with the devil? All of these questions I had, and I still have, as I've been thinking about this. Also at the end of the story, she kind of gives an explanation as to why she didn't give you an answer and why she gave you such hard rules. Like, this is the reality. Like, this is what I'm giving you, and this is the question that I'm posing, and the question answers itself. And she received a letter from a reader talking about how, like, also essentially Omelas is like ourselves, and also the child is ourselves. So it's the misery that lives inside of us. It is the desperation and how we feed into this sadness, and we don't touch it. And so in a way we are the child and Omelas is the world. And it's incredible, because if you think about it, that is essentially our reality as well. Like, as I'm speaking as like American centric, obviously, but we live in a relatively good, and by good I mean like economically, like most of us have food on our table. I'm gonna be speaking more on my experience, like food on my table, roof over my head, like, you know, pleasantries and stuff like that. And I live with the knowledge that there are children that are starving, and that is the reality that I live in. And I, in a way, have to choose to ignore that, and I have to choose to ignore that there are people that are dying, there are people that are suffering, and it's like this social contract that you live with, like, see what I mean? Like, the morality of it all, and like, also, like, are the people of Omelas like bad people for allowing that, like, one child, one person to suffer if it means that everybody else can be happy? And there is no right answer, I guess you can say. I could definitely argue that, like, yes, allowing everybody to suffer so this one child doesn't suffer, but it's like, what is the level of suffering? And does at one point this child stop believing that it's suffering if that becomes your whole existence? Like, you don't understand. Obviously at the beginning, like the quote that I read, it talks about how, like, the child remembers and the child recognizes and has memories. And so does all of that get erased because they've been there for so long? And like, how long is the child gonna be there? Like, because at one point when it's opening the story and telling you about the child, it tells you that the child doesn't remember anything or doesn't recognize anything other than what it's been given now. So it's just, there's so many questions I get asked, and that is and why I love literature. And just I want to discuss so much more, and just again, like, the implications of what the Omelas is, and who, and the way that it can relate to mental illness, to violence, to suicide, to all of that stuff. Personally, obviously, this is like my analysis of it, and just even so many years after she's written it, it's still such a amazing piece of literature and such an evoking piece of literature. And I think that it's very, very interesting that BTS used this in their music video, like, going back to, like, full circle to that. It's like, especially if you kind of know a little bit of what Spring Day is about, and kind of the message that they're sending and stuff like that. So it just it's amazing, and I have so many more thoughts, but that's all I'm gonna say. Let me know if I made any sense at all, because I don't even think I made sense. If you have any thoughts, if you read it, if you have any similar opinions, or if you have a different interpretation of the child and Omelas and the ones who walked away and what it all means, and what is the meaning, and what would the choice that you would make, I guess, in a way, because damn, like, anyways, that is all for me, because I am still so just amazed by this piece of literature. Yeah, that is all for me. I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or night, whenever you happen to be watching this, and happy reading and watching. Bye!